It's winter here in the Northern Hemisphere, and for many of us, that means snow. And while 25mm road tires and even traditional mountain bikes might not fare so well in that kind of terrain, bikes like this State Bicycle Co. 6061 Trail Plus live for it. This bike in particular caught our eye for a few reasons. One of which is, of course, its Wildberry paint job, but also its $999 price tag. This makes it one of the most inexpensive fat bikes you can get. But as you'd imagine, State had to make quite a few compromises to get there. So in this video, we're gonna put the bike through its paces to see how it fares in a variety of settings. But first, let's talk about what you'll get when you buy one. State Bicycle Co. is known primarily for their fixed gear and urban bikes. But these days they have a full repertoire of rides ranging from carbon fiber road bikes to this, a 40-pound or 18-kilogram fat bike. As the name suggests, the frame is built out of 6061 aluminum and comes in 4 sizes, small through extra large. It's also got some pretty conservative geometry, highlighted by a 71-degree head tube angle. My size large has a reach of 431mm, a 596mm stack, and 480mm seat tube. Inside the front triangle, you'll find 2 sets of water bottle cage mounts, as well as a pair of braze-ons on the seat stays to mount a rear rack. But the bike is otherwise free of mounting points. It also has internal cable routing for the rear derailleur and brake, but is sadly not compatible with an internally routed dropper post. Lastly, the bike comes with quick-release axles, 190mm in the back and 135 in the front, and is available in 2 colors, this wild berry as well as a much more subtle gray. An underlining trait of all of Slate's bikes is value, and this 6061 Trail Plus is no exception. The bike comes with 26 by 4.5-inch Kenda Juggernaut tires. The relatively short lugs and minimal tread pattern help reduce rolling resistance while providing adequate traction on dirt and groomed snow, but struggle to maintain grip on the slippery, packed snow around town. Braking is taken care of by Tektron's MD M300 mechanical disc brakes paired to 180mm rotors. It's been a while since I've ridden mechanical brakes, and to be honest, I was a little wary of how well they'd perform. But to be honest, in the low-speed, snowy terrain that the bike is designed for, they did just fine. To be honest, the Achilles heel of the build is the Shimano Altus drivetrain. At the heart of the problem was the rear derailleur, which lacks a clutch. This makes drop chains a frequent occurrence, and the last thing I wanted to do on a snowy ride was hop off my bike, remove my gloves, and reinstall my chain. The shifting was quite inconsistent as well, and despite many attempts at fixing it, I could never remedy the go shifting or simply not shifting at all. Lastly, the small 11 to 32 tooth cassette that the bike comes with, paired with a 28 tooth chainring, proved to be too narrow for single track riding, especially in the snow. That, combined with the chain's propensity to skip under load, forced me to hike up anything more than a moderate grade. At the end of the day, I know that this is a value price bike and I shouldn't be too picky, but honestly, I would have loved to see this bike spec'd with maybe one of the new Shimano Q's drivetrain or Microshift Advent instead of this Altus group set. The rest of the componentry is just about what you'd expect from a $1,000 mountain bike. Everything worked just fine, but with no extra bells and whistles for me to brag about. And that's just fine by me. I love a good value price bike as long as it can still provide a fun and consistent riding experience. And the only thing holding this 6061 Trail Plus from doing that is that Altus drivetrain, but that could be remedied for just about 150 bucks. Speaking of fun though, now let's go on and talk about how the bike performs on the trail. Despite what it may look like now, winter came late here in Central Oregon, and that meant that my first ride on this bike was on some single track trail with just a dusting of snow over it. These XC trails were relatively flat, with no steep climbs or screaming descents, and these conditions suited the bike well. The small reach and short wheelbase made the bike feel surprisingly agile, despite its portly weight and massive tires. As I mentioned earlier, the mechanical Tektron brakes were up to the task, and on this relatively flat, non-technical ride, the Altus drivetrain wasn't too big of a hindrance either. So while a trail ride in borderline normal conditions isn't exactly what the Trail Plus is designed for, it still proved to be pretty dang fun as long as you kept in mind that you were riding a $1,000 bike. Shortly after that ride, the snow did finally begin to fall, which meant it was time to take this bike to what I assumed would be its home turf, groomed fat bike trails. Sadly, however, it didn't take long to realize that this wasn't the case. My 6-mile loop began with a long descent, and the short reach, long stem, and steep head tube angle made for a nerve-wrackingly forward-leaning weight bias. Thankfully, however, the Kenda tires and Tektron brakes once again held their own, keeping me safe, albeit scared, all the way down. From there, it was straight into a relatively steep, sustained climb. The added rolling resistance of the snow, combined with the stiff gearing, meant that I had to put down a decent bit of power to keep the Trail Plus rolling. and the Altus drivetrain did not like this. Things improved later down the trail when the train grew more undulating and it was easier to maintain speed. At the end of that first loop, I had mixed feelings. I of course enjoyed the uniquely fun experience of taking this bike through the snow, but the lasting memory of having to walk up those snowy hills and stop repeatedly to reinstall the chain prevented me from going out on a second loop. Given my lackluster experience on the Groomed single track and State Bicycle Co.'s reputation for making dialed urban bikes, there was one last place that I wanted to test this thing out on, and that was around town. Here, the frame's relatively small dimensions proved helpful once again, as meandering in and out of traffic was a breeze. Just as on the single track trail, the Altus drivetrain handled the low incline roads and bicycle trails in town much better than it did on the fat bike trails. Lastly, I received a total of 2 comments on my sweet purple bike, and that's 2 more than I usually get when riding around on my mountain bike that costs 4 times as much. All in all, the Trail Plus handled the urban environment much better than the other 2 places I tested it. And that really shouldn't come as too big of a surprise, given the budget part spec and a frame geometry that's more akin to a commuter or a hybrid than it is a mountain bike. And to be honest, that's a good way to think about this bike. It's a fat bike that'll allow you to ride around town all winter long, but probably isn't the best to take out on more technical single track. Next, let's talk about how the State Bicycle Co. 6061 Trail Plus compares to the rest of the market. And first off, like I said at the beginning of the video, at $999, it's one of the cheapest options you can buy. One of its few close competitors is the Rocky Mountain Blizzard A10. In my opinion, the biggest difference between these 2 bikes comes down to the frame. The Blizzard is much more akin to a traditional mountain bike. It has a 66-degree head tube angle, long reach, high stack, and larger 27.5-inch wheels. This makes the bike much better equipped for the mountains, but probably a bit harder to handle around town. The Blizzard is also compatible with an internally routed dropper post and has a lot more mounting points on the frame for those long multi-day adventures. The difference between these 2 bikes then largely comes down to your riding preference. If you're looking for an inexpensive, stylish way to get around town all year long, then it's going to be pretty hard to beat the $999 6061 Trail Plus. But if you want to spend a majority of your time in the mountains on groomed single track or even just traditional single track trails, then I think that Rocky Mountain Blizzard A10 is going to be worth the extra $300. All in all, it's great to see State Bicycle Co. take their value-minded approach to building bikes and apply it to the fat bike world. And while the Trail Plus might not be as versatile out of the box as I would have hoped, a simple drivetrain upgrade could definitely change this. If you have any more questions about this bike, or really any fat bike, you can go ahead and leave those in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them. While you're there, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and like this video as well as subscribe to the 99 Spokes YouTube channel. And as always, remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.